Okay, we are live. So, hello everyone, and welcome to Dr. Tara Thursdays, only for Dr. Briana Boyd. I am so excited to have this conversation, so much so that we cannot wait to bring Dr. Briana back. For those of you who are just tuning in, you are in for a wonderful, wonderful treat. I feel like we have one of the best experts in talking about the topic at hand. And if those of you who tuned in about 3 weeks ago, you know that I was talking to Dr. Briana before we started one of our most watched episodes, co-parenting with a person with narcissism. Just the feedback that I have received has just been overwhelming. Literally, I got feedback and messages about how people kind of rethink the way that they deal with people. And so, one, thank you for that, for your insight. And then two, welcome back to Dr. Tara Tuesdays. We wanted to have this conversation with Dr. Briana because the topic of dealing with someone with narcissism is so broad. And what we spent a lot of time on talking about during part one is just understanding what narcissistic personality disorder is, what it is not. We started to get a better understanding of how we can start to interact with them. When Dr. Bree and I were talking offline, one of the things that she emphasized is the importance of really setting aside time to talk about boundaries and how important it is to set and maintain boundaries when dealing with a person with narcissism. And so that's where I'm going to stop. And I'm going to introduce Dr. Bree and just remind people of who you are. And again, why the part about setting boundaries is so important to you when we're talking about this topic.
Absolutely. Hi, thank you so much for having me back. I'm so happy to be back. I had such a good time last time.
And thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Like you said, the topic of effectively dealing with narcissism is so immense. And so even to try to get 2 hours to help people jumpstart their new strategy plans and their understanding is really great. So thanks for having me. And just for those of you who didn't tune in last time, I'm Dr. Briana Boyd. I am a professor at San Diego State University. I teach a stress management class where I teach boundaries, a self-compassion class, and a trauma class for therapists and training. I have a private practice, and I do forensic work, so post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm a subject matter expert. So I go to testify, do a lot of assessments and consultation. I think that boundaries personally have changed my life, right? And I can see the relationship between boundaries and co-parenting with people with narcissism. But even if you're not co-parenting with somebody with narcissism, boundaries are one of the most important things somebody can establish, right? I always kind of joke that there's certain things nobody can do for you. Like nobody can lose weight for you, right? Like nobody can set boundaries for you, right? That's something we really have to learn to do for ourselves. We were talking a little earlier about just how generically we throw out. You should set boundaries. He's a narcissist. You should set boundaries. And it's like, okay, what does that mean? How do I do it? And so we say boundaries, but no meat in the content. And so that's hopefully what I'm going to be able to bring today. So I always ask the question, I've given this talk 100 times. I always ask the question, when do you have the right to say no?
When do you have the right to say no?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if you're in the comments, I feel like you have the right to say no from first glance, from the hello. You have me at hello. No.
You have the right to say no any and every and all the time. That's premise number one, right? And why and for what reason do you have to say no? What's a good reason that you have that you can say no to somebody?
Any reason, I think.
Because you don't want to.
Right.
That's okay. So what's really sweet is I give this talk a lot, and I always open with that idea. When do we have the right to say no? And everybody always says, whenever we want. And then I say, okay, and for what reason? And people say, well, for any reason. But very few of us are actually implementing that.
Right.
Everyone else has the right to say no, except for me right now. And if I say no, I need a really good reason for that. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I just really want to start with the baseline premise that every single one of us has the right to say no whenever we feel like it for whatever reason. All right. Boundaries, in addition to being helpful in relationships, like I said last time, boundaries are relationship maintainers, not relationship breakers.
I love that. Relationship maintainers, not relationship breakers. I love that.
Yes, because I'm responsible for expressing myself and my needs. And if I don't express them, they can't be met. And other people cannot be more responsible for my needs and my limits than me. And so when I set those limits, I can actually maintain closer relationships with people because I'm getting my needs met. So when I'm clear about where my lines are and people really respect them, we can get really far down the road together, right?
Can I ask you a question, Dr.
Sure.
Bree? So one of the things that just hit me just off the bat is, so, you know, my foundation is working with parents. And one of the things that I teach parents over and over again is to teach your children to set boundaries, even with you. Because
Correct.
so many people as an adult didn't have the opportunity to set, right? You told me how I feel. You told me what I was going to do, even when you knew I didn't want to do it. And even if it was something that, you know, and I think sometimes in certain communities, especially communities of color, it's seen as disrespectful if you say, I don't want to do it, right? Like, what did you say? Who are you talking to? And so to become an adult, this really is like a muscle, not even that I haven't utilized, like that I'm trying to strengthen. Like for some people, honestly, their baseline is, I've never even used this muscle.
Correct. That was me. That was me. I mean, I came to this work so humbly. Poor boundaries is a family legacy, typically, right? Our parents weren't raised to have great boundaries, or were raised with their boundaries actively violated, and then our parents in turn, you know, teach us not to have boundaries. And it's all in support of the family, right? It's all in support of the family, except everyone's in the family doing all these things they don't want to do, furious with each other. Right? And so, you know, and so it's really interesting too, to think about boundaries as like a legacy breaker, right? I'm going to make a legacy for my family offspring, because I'm going to say no. I'm going to model how to say no. And when my children say no, I'm going to say, okay. Because they can grow up understanding what it feels like to be respected and boundaried. And so when somebody doesn't respect their boundaries, that's going to feel very off to them. It's going to be very uncomfortable. You want to talk about raising children who are resilient against narcissism? This is how you do it. You let a child be completely self-possessed. I mean, within reason. Like, they do have to brush their teeth. They do have to go to bed. They do have to shower, right? We're talking about, I don't like that thing. I don't want to be hugged right now. I don't want to get Uncle so-and-so.
I don't like broccoli, right? Like, it's okay.
Correct. So I think it's really, and I can't stress enough about communities of color, also single parent households. Are rife for boundary pushings, because moms might need support. You know, like, listen, I know that you really don't want to do X, but I really need you to do X right now, because I kind of need the support, right? And so sometimes we can learn to be poorly boundaried with really the best of intentions.
So I think that's such a great reminder for people too, because part of this work is, this person loved me the best that they could, right? They tried the best they could. And they're still human. Like you said, a lot of times having poor boundaries is a result of, I didn't have them set for me. And so I'm just continuing this legacy of,
And this is how I saw a family function.
Right.
And I honestly believe, for the most part, I mean, I'm sure there's some exceptions to this, but I believe every generation tries to love their kids even kind of better than, you know, learn from it, take what was good from their parents and try to improve on that. I feel like every generation does that, right? And so we're all just doing the best we can, you know, and we model what we see. And when our parents have poor boundaries with people in their lives, and then they expect us to have poor boundaries to help support that, and then we learn to have poor boundaries and we watch poor boundaries, it's a party. It's a good time. So it's important to ask yourself before we get started, like, hold on, let me see if I can make this a little bigger and have it. Here we go. Hi, sorry, stand by. Technical difficulty.
While you're doing this, I want to read one of the comments that Christina is saying. She's saying that this can be tough in teenage years for kids when you're trying to get them to balance between responsibilities.
100%. It's always difficult. It's always, you know, so teenagers really need the most work with this. You know, they need the most support and learning how to set them with their peers and things like that. And then they need some space. I mean, the whole function of adolescent brains is separation and independence. I mean, that's selected by nature so that they leave the pack and go find some genetic diversity. And so nature selects that in them. So we try to do, so I think it's even more important with teenagers. So this is really, really tough. Yeah, absolutely. No kidding. And this is really wild too. Talk about boundaries. Sometimes it's okay to let them fail so that they can learn natural consequences. So that becomes the internal motivation to do something differently.
One of the things that I always tell parents is that you have to become the safest place for your children to fail. A lot of times with parents, we don't let our children set boundaries because we're scared they're going to make a mistake. And it's like, no, but failure is a way of learning. It's one of the best ways that the brain learns, right? And so for me and my, like, I want to be the safest place for you to fail. It's going to make a mistake, make it with me, right? So that we can learn and we can grow from that as well. And then I think too, that there's a difference between when we talk about boundaries and like responsibilities and boundaries and like personal preferences. You can have rules, you can have family norms and family expectations, and still allow choices within reason. Yeah,
and autonomy. I was just having a session with like a couple weeks ago about this, and it was like the children have chores, and the mother micromanages how they do the chores. And I spoke with mom to say, no, we get to assign chores, but the child gets to do the chore the way the child gets to do the chore. I mean, could you imagine somebody following you around the house as an adult being like, no, wipe from left to right. Like, and you're like, I can wipe from right to left. Right. For personal preferences versus boundaries. So I think that's a really good place to start. So I think we should get into like the nuts and bolts because it's quite a bit, and I'm like 5,000 miles an hour. So I'm going to try to go slowly. So I hope we have time to get through all of it. Yeah. How am I doing? Am I doing that?
I'm doing great, Dr. Bree.
Wave if I get too fast. Right. Okay. All right. So when we think about boundaries, some questions that we want to start with is do I feel a lot of resentment in my life? Do I walk around feeling angry towards people, resentful? Do I have expectations? Do I get my needs met by others? When I say to people, hey, I need X or Y, are they able to meet my needs? This is so tiny. Let me see. Hold on. I can do this. Give me 1 second. Here we go. This is perfect. There we go. So when we want to ask ourselves, like, are you satisfied with your current relationships? Do you get your needs met by others? Do you get overwhelmed by interpersonal commitments, feeling like the demands and commands of everybody else kind of pull you in 1,000 directions? And do you feel resentment? So those are the questions I want you to think about. Like, are you satisfied? Can you get your needs met? Do you get overwhelmed with everyone kind of wanting a piece of you all the time? And do you feel resentment? Okay. So that's what we want to think about when we're working with boundaries. If you answered yes to any of those, congratulations, you have some boundary trouble. And I really mean it when I say I come to this work so humbly. I did not have a boundary. I did not know how to set a boundary. I literally did not know what a boundary was. And now I give talks about it. So if I can set boundaries, you all have so much hope. Anybody can do it, right? And it's hard at first. It's a very steep learning curve. And what you'll find is initially it's going to feel really uncomfortable and pretty pretty challenging. And over time, it's going to not only get much easier, but the process is so reinforcing that you'll never look back, right? Mm-hmm. So once you get into it, you're like, oh, this is pretty amazing. Yeah, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, and no, thank you. Yeah. And so even though it's a difficult process at first, it's very reinforcing. And so it's an easy process to continue down the road with. So let me ask you a question. Who should we set boundaries with?
I believe I'm setting boundaries with myself first. I have to set boundaries with me first.
I love that. And that would be included in my answer, which would be everybody.
Right. Next, right. Let me like that I and I, right? Like, let me make sure me are straight before I set about, because like if I'm just playing myself, right? If I know I'm going to boundary, right? Let me start with my definite yes before I move it on. Mm-hmm.
I love that. I've never really considered that, but yeah, I and I is the first place.
I and I is my first boundary, right? Yeah. Am I clear on this? Am I clear this is what I want or don't want? Get myself to that yes, and then apply it to everybody else. Mm-hmm.
I love that. Oh yes. So yes, getting clear with yourself about what you want, checking in. I would like call that kind of checking in, right? Right. And then everybody. And here's what's a little bit counterintuitive. We often think we need the most boundaries with those people over there, when in fact we really need the most boundaries with the people who are closest with us. Yeah. Right? Let me give you a good example. The people are closest to us, not only do we may have multiple hats that we wear in the day with that person, right? So we'll have multiple limits around these multiple roles, right? Plus, we all go down the road together. The people we're closest with, we go down the road together. And so as we go down the road together, different things are going to come up that require different kinds of boundaries, right? I need less boundaries with the checkout person at Trader Joe's, right? There's already a boundary between us, and the interaction is very scripted already, right? And so we're like, oh, set boundaries with those people. But once people get inside my inner wall, it's free for all, right? I really want to take that, shut it on its head and say, you really need to have the most boundaries with the people around you, right? And then the boundaries can kind of get fewer and maybe less, managed as they get further out. Okay. Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Let's see. So let's talk about, we got into this a little bit, right? But essentially, boundaries are shaped by reinforcement, okay? Poor boundaries are shaped by reinforcement, and good boundaries are shaped by actually punishment, but we don't need to get into that, right? But it's shaped by how we react. And so I'm gonna paint you a picture. Let's say that I don't know why I imagine this, but it's always like a row house of brownstone, like a street of brownstones in London. And I don't know why, but for me, they're brown with red doors. You have fun with your own imagery, okay? We live in this beautiful neighborhood, and we live behind door number 3. Right? And one day somebody comes to our neighborhood and they are hungry and they want some candy, right? And we're good people, right? We want to help. So this person goes and bangs door number 1, hello, is anyone in there? I'd like some candy. And nobody answers, right? So they move on to door number 2, hello, nobody home, right? Move on to door number 3. We live behind door number 3. And somebody knocks on our door. Hello. Oh, hello, are you in there? And we're in there and we're good people, right? And we may have like an extra bunch of candy from Halloween that's left over, and we should help if we can. Right? So we open the door and we feel really, really good about it. And we hand over the candy and we say, yeah, here's some candy. We Instagram it, post it, like, I help my neighbor with candy. Right? And we feel good, they feel good, we're on our way. Right? By the way, this is important to state. This is not a very romantic idea, but I find it to be quite true in that we're all just looking to get needs met. We're all just organisms bumping up against each other, looking to get needs met, right? We're on a call to meet a need. People are on this call to meet a need. Right? When somebody comes to me for a session, they're there to meet a need. I'm there to meet a need. So we're all just little organisms bumping up against each other, looking to get a need met. The question, which you said, set boundaries with myself first, is we have to ask ourselves, do I want to meet this need?
Right.
Okay. And so people who come to us, door number 3, right? We have to decide, like, okay, do I want to meet this need? And then I meet it, right? Mm-hmm. So we're all bumping against each other, looking to get needs met. Right? So this person's looking to get a need met. I met the need. What did I teach them?
They can come to you when that need presents itself again.
Correct, right? I shaped that behavior. I gave them a reinforcer, literally candy, right? And then I taught them, hey, this is a great place to come get candy, right? So a week later, they run out of candy. I'm down now. I gave that person quite a bit of candy, right? They knock on, where do they start? Do they start at door number 1?
No, they start with you, right?
Right, because it works, right? So people just do what works, right? That's simple, right? So I showed them that this is a good place to get candy. They're going to skip door number 1, skip number 2, come and get candy, right? Hello, remember me? You helped me last time. That was so wonderful. So thank you, right? So you're like, I got less candy, but I'm a good person, right? I don't feel bad. I don't want to feel guilty. I should share. I should help. I have more. It's a lot of the stuff we get taught when we're children to support our poor boundaries. So I open the door and I give them more candy, right? What did I just teach them?
For you to come.
You got it. So if this is a place, if this is something you love to do, like if you're dying to give away candy, this is a perfect setup. Right. You keep giving this candy, and when this person shows up, you're handing it out. This is perfect. Now you got 2 organisms that collided. This one's looking to get a need met. This one's dying to meet the need. This is perfect. Okay. Mm-hmm. You don't want to see, you're not trying to give away candy, right? What's happening here?
You're getting resentment. You're starting to feel anxious, right? You're starting to feel guilty, right?
Guilty, anxious. As I'm training this person to come to me.
Right. Wow.
That's the part, right? Like, I don't want to do this. I hate this. And I'm going to train you to keep coming. And this is what I say when I mean these boundaries are relationship preservers, not relationship breakers. Okay. So I love what you said about resentment, guilt, and boundaries. They all work there. So here we go. 3rd time's a charm. They come around. I've got 1 piece left. The Snickers, the good kind, like the single bite with the chocolate around all sides. It's like the perfect ratio of candy and goodness, right? And chocolate. And you don't want to give it away, right? So they come around.
Freeze. So okay, wait. We had snagged. Right. So they come around.
They come around.
Right. There we go. Keep going.
Did you get the Snickers? Okay. Uh-huh. You don't want to give it away. You love the last piece. You really want it, right? And they come back around. They knock on the door, right? They have reliably gotten candy when they've come here. If you don't answer the door when they knock on first pass, what do you think is going to happen?
They'll wait, or they'll get angry, or
They'll wait.
Right. Oh.
Get into that. Am I snagging again?
We snagged again. We got them at their weight, and now something else.
So, shoot, where was I?
So you said they'll wait first.
Oh, yeah, they'll wait, or they will knock again.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, Because we're training them. We train them that this is, and so once people receive that training, they don't just walk away. They do what they were
trained to do. I keep going now.
Okay, good. I can tell by your face. I'm like, oh, this is not.
It has 4 boundaries with reception. Okay.
The internet has boundaries. It's like, I'm tired. I'm done.
Yeah.
Okay. So
people are getting it. Shanae, DJ Shay Chambers is saying that this is a great analogy. It's really connecting. So keep going. We're just going to keep going. Right. Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay. So here's the deal. Somebody knocks. I train them to knock. I train them that I give candy when they knock. I don't want to give the candy. They knock. They don't go away. They knock louder. They knock harder. Here's where this is important. This comes in. Now they say, oh my God, please help me. You're the only one who will open the door. If you don't help me, nobody will help me. What feeling is being elicited from me? What feeling is
and responsibility too, right?
Mm-hmm. Responsibility. So guilt and boundaries have a very close relationship, and guilt and resentment have a very close relationship. We'll get into that in just a second. Okay, that's really important, how all of this functions. And so this guilt is such a powerful internal motivator that it will actually kind of force us to offer ourselves to be used. When I talk about you doing something you don't want to do, I talk about offering yourself to be used. Actually, when I talk about doing anything, I offer myself to be used. And do I want to offer myself to be used? I should offer myself. If I don't want to offer myself, I shouldn't offer myself, because if I do, I'm teaching people to come to me for something I don't want to offer.
Right.
Okay. So this is interesting. Guilt is selected in pack animals. Okay. Pack animals have guilt. You think about a dog. Have you ever seen a dog look guilty?
Right.
Isn't that cute? Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen a cat look guilty?
No, my cat never
looked guilty. No, straight out the mouth. Like, who cares? I didn't. What's for dinner, right? Like, so why would nature select guilt in pack animals?
Keep accountability or hierarchy, right?
Correct. Keep accountability, right? So if I need a pack to survive, guilt helps me. Guilt helps me stay in good standing in the pack. If I do something to transgress in the pack and I feel guilt will rise in me, guilt is so yucky, we'll do almost anything to get rid of it. Okay. And so what that does is it acts as a powerful internal motivator to get you to go across the village and say, I'm sorry. Right. So that's why pack animals have guilt. Unfortunately, boundaries sort of crosswire into that primitive function. Right. And so now we can poke that guilt button and get people to feel guilty, and then they will offer me what they don't want to offer me. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. So when we think about boundary setting, we need to get really, really clear about what guilt is and what guilt isn't. These days, through a lot of training and practice, I understand guilt as a functional emotion. Okay, nothing more, nothing less. It's simply an indicator. Okay, when I feel that really yucky feeling of guilt, I have a job to do. I want to look around my environment and ask myself, did I do something to somebody besides say no? Okay, if the answer is yes, then I want to use that guilt as a motivator to go repair. Right? I want to go, man, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that crazy thing I did last week. Oh, I did some crazy stuff online this week on my social media. And so then I was like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have called so-and-so that name on your thread. That was rude, right? So when I look around, I'm like, oh, I did that thing. Guilt will help me say, I'm sorry. And then guilt will help me stay in good standings in the pack. Those of us that don't feel guilt, we don't have great standing in the pack. People don't like us. They may move on without us. They may not feed us. Okay, but this is the important part. If you haven't listened to anything, listen to this. This is the most important part.
So someone get ready in the comments, right? So we can remember.
So if you start to feel a sense of guilt because you've said no, your job is to look around and ask yourself, did I do something bad to somebody? If the answer is no, what are you supposed to do with those guilty feelings?
Let them go. Let them make peace with them and let them subside. Yeah.
Tolerate them.
Yes.
We're going to inoculate ourselves to guilt. So we're going to let those guilty feelings come. We're going to say, okay, I feel really, really guilty. This feels really, really terrible, but I didn't do anything to anybody, but say no, thank you. Okay. And so I'm going to tolerate this guilt. And I tolerate it by telling myself, you're a good person. You're allowed to say no. It's okay to say no. This guilty feeling will pass. Okay. Here's the thing about guilt trips. Do you like guilt trips, Tara? No. I hate guilt trips. Right? Yes. And here's the deal. If you like guilt trips, render them effective. Train people to use them on you. If you don't like guilt trips, you must render them ineffective.
Right.
And so if somebody plants a seed of guilt in you and waters it to get you to offer yourself to be used, if you buckle and give them what they want when they guilt tripped you, what did you teach them?
Guilt is something that is effective to get what you need or what you want.
You got it. So if you want something from me, you guilt me, you will get it. And usually the people that buckle to guilt trips are the people who feel so uncomfortable with guilt. So we're training people to give us something we hate, to give us something we don't want to give up.
So guilt allows us to train people. To give up something that we don't want to give up, right? So guilt allows us to give people a reason to give us a feeling that we hate in order to give up something that we don't want to give up. Okay?
When we buckle to guilt, we are teaching people to do something to us that we hate to give up something we don't want to give up.
Wow.
That's the worst training in the world, I guarantee you. Okay? All right. And so when we set boundaries, we want to be firm and kind. Firm and kind. I'll get to that in a second. Remember how I said we're all just little beings bumping up against each other, trying to get needs met, right? Here's what you need to understand as well. Somebody somewhere is dying to meet the need, believe it or not, okay? Somebody behind door number 7 has so much candy. And they're like, why doesn't anyone come around looking for candy? This person is dying to give away candy, right? So we're back. I love your boundary thing. We're back to I and I, right? We're very clear with ourselves about what we want to give away and what we can give freely and in what amount, right? And what we absolutely do not want to give up, right? And what we want to give up conditionally, like what I love to offer sometimes and what I don't want to offer other times, right? For example, I love to help my friends in crisis. Like if your house is burning down, call me. Like I'm a friend. If you're going through a breakup, if you're having a psychological thing, if your child's having a psychotic break, like I'm your girl. I want to offer that. I love to offer that. And when I offer it freely with no expectation, right? That gets into the resentment piece.
I want to ask you two questions because I want to make sure we stay with the firm and kind. And so I see some comments like, is this self-hatred or is this an abusive relationship? Would we say yes or is it binary like that? Like, I think there's some.
What's the question?
That to teach someone to give us, like, what did you say? When we give into guilt, we're teaching someone to use a feeling that we hate to give up something that we don't want. Is that classified as self-hatred or is that characteristics of an abusive? It can be.
No, it can be. It can be, but not necessarily. I had terrible boundaries, but I didn't hate myself. And people who used guilt to get what they wanted from me, they did it because it worked. Now people use different methods to get what they want from me because it works or doesn't work. So it could be an abusive relationship, absolutely, but not necessarily, right? And it could be that we hate ourselves, but not necessarily.
Exactly.
Right?
Made that distinction that it's not an absolute indicator of those things.
Absolutely.
There's it's so much gray area before you get from self-love to self-hate, right? It's not
100%.
There's a lot of phases that you have to go through, and even with abuse too, like thinking about boundaries in the terms of abuse or healthy relations. Like, is this healthy for me or is this unhealthy for me versus this is wrong? Because I think abuse, again, so many people have really skewed ideas of what abuse is and what abuse is not, right? So thinking in terms of how I have helped people understand it. Is this healthy? Is this something that, like you said, feels good when I'm giving, or is it causing a concern for me, right? And it doesn't have to get to the point of quote unquote abuse for me to set a boundary.
100%. Well, here's the thing too, like I mentioned before, like boundary setting or family legacies. Like my mom was not raised to have boundaries with her parents, but her parents loved her. And it wasn't a matter of self-hate. It was a matter of like, hey, this is what my mom is training me to do in the family. And so this is my role. And this is how we all get down the road together. Like I'm the left wheel, she's the right wheel, that's the rear wheel. Like, and that's what we do. And then my mom you're getting it, mom. Like she's still working on her boundaries, right? And I'm working on my boundaries, and I'll push my mom's boundaries without even knowing it sometimes, unless she tells me, right? And it's not because, and she might buckle because she doesn't know how to say no, right? And she doesn't buckle because she hates herself, and I don't push her boundary because I'm abusing her. Right? But when we think about our relationships with people who are abusive, boundaries, especially with narcissism, boundaries will be the only way to make a change because you cannot appeal to empathy. And guilt is appealing to empathy. I'm going to make you feel a certain kind of way so that motivates you to do something for me. I'm going to make you feel bad about my circumstances so bad. You're going to have so much empathy for my circumstances that I'm going to use that to get you to give me what I want, right? And so when we try to guilt our narcissist, and so we then use guilt on other people and want them to buckle to guilt. We do that too, right? I get trained to guilt myself out of things, and that trains me to guilt other people out of things. You know, my mom has used guilt in the past to get what she wants, and my mom, it will buckle in a second for guilt. If my mom feel guilty about something, she will give it up immediately. I mean, I could push my mom's boundary in two with guilt, and then she'll guilt us. Because that's how it all works. It's all about like kind of training and modeling. And my mom wasn't given the skills.
Right.
You know, and then I didn't have the skills, and I had to kind of learn the skills. And now I'm teaching her the skills, and she's using them, and it's really, really cool. It's really, really cool.
Keep going.
Okay. So we want to really understand guilt as an indicator and a pro-social emotion. And we really need to change our relationships with guilt if we're going to get good at setting boundaries. Okay. I've inoculated myself to guilt. I'm not perfect. I still struggle from time to time. Right. But I have really great boundaries with people in my life. Right. And people know now with me, if somebody gives me a guilt trip, I absolutely will not bend. Even if I was on the fence, I get a guilt trip, done. It is absolutely done. Because if I buckle, I teach them this is it. So I really don't want to teach people. I don't want to shape people. Something I don't want to give up.
Say it one more time. Where you went out, you said you don't want to teach people and you don't want to shape people.
I don't want to teach people or shape people to behave with me in a way I don't want to behave with, to give up something I don't want to give up.
Okay.
So this is really important too. Okay. So we're talking about guilt. Somebody somewhere is dying to meet the need. That's important. Okay. Somebody behind door number 7 has all the candy in the world. Okay. Whenever I give this talk, people say, well, what about moving? You have to help your friends move even if you don't want to, because you're going to need help moving, and they're not going to help you, but they're going to help you. Right. So basically what you're saying is, I'm going to have friendships where the contract is I'm obligated to do things I don't want to do so that they're obligated to do things they don't want to do. That's an interesting premise to start with. Right. But so I do this in rooms sometimes of 200 people, and I'll say, who in here loves to move? Who in here loves to help people move? And honestly, you will see people raise their hand. It's always about 4 or 5. And I say, look around. I did not pay them to raise their hands, right? Somebody somewhere is dying to help you meet the need. Don't guilt your friend behind door number 3 to help you move. If your friend behind door number 3 says no, thank you, find the person who's dying to help you move, right? My sister-in-law is one of those people. It's incredible. Thank you, Andrea. When we moved, she's like, can I help you? I was like, you want to help us? She came over like 4 or 5 times. I was at work and she was packing my stuff, right? That's who you want to help you move.
I'm going to ask a question Christina's asking. She says, should we call people out for someone who continues to push the boundary, or should we just avoid? When we're in the process of learning to set boundaries, do we start with calling people out, or do we avoid? Like, how do we?
We're going to get into that. Okay. That's where we're headed. So I'm painting the picture so you can understand it dynamically, and then we're going to get to the nuts and bolts of how to set it.
All right. So hold tight, Christina. We're coming to you.
Yes, we are. Totally, girl. We're coming to you. Okay. So next thing is beware the extinction burst. Okay. The extinction burst is a term we use to describe a temporary increase in behavior before the behavior extinguishes. What that means is the behavior will get bigger, faster, harder, more intense before the person stops doing it. Okay. Last time we touched on it, but the example of the vending machine, everything we need to learn about boundaries, we can learn from a vending machine, right? And so the vending machines teach us a series of behaviors to get a need met. Put the dollar in, hit C4, put $1 in, hit C4, a Coke yields. Okay. So, or Vens. And so the vending machine just taught me exactly what to do to get what I want from it, right? I can't put $1 in. That's not enough. I can't just hit the button. That's not enough. It's a very specific series of behaviors. And vending machines aren't shy about it. Vending machines are like, well, I wonder if that's too much to ask. You know, vending machines are like, oh, well, I wonder if they're going to hate me after I do this. Vending machines, like, it's very simple. And it's interesting because when vending machines set the limits with us very consistently, we don't care it's fine. We're like, oh, of course we put the $1 in and hit C4. Right. But imagine how frustrating it would be if every time we went to this vending machine, it was a new series of behaviors to get what you wanted.
Wow.
Confusing. Right. Well, last time I had to put the $1 in and hit the button. This time I just put the $1 in and the Coke came out. And then one time I put the $1 and hit the button and nothing happened. And then one time I hit the $1, hit the button and corn nuts came out. Like, that would make us crazy. Right. And so if we set inconsistent boundaries with people, we're really confusing them. But if we set consistent, firm boundaries over and over and over, people do well with that, right? Just like the vending machine, all right? So let's say I've been going to this vending machine for a year, and one day I go and I hit the button, I put the dollar in, I hit the button, and no Coke comes out, right? I don't just walk away. Nobody in the history of the world has ever just walked away. Over like 75 cents too. I mean, you can come undone. 75 cents, you know? But it's not about that. It's that the vending machine has taught you a series of behaviors. And so when we don't get what we want, when we get the series of behaviors, we temporarily do an increase in those behaviors and we escalate. Right.
I'm hitting the vending machine. Now I'm hitting on it, right? I'm ramming my body up against it. It's for 75 cents net. Right. So it starts like this. You put the dollar in and then you hit C4 and nothing happens. But you've been taught that C4 works. So then you have a temporary increase in C4. So you go C4, and then that doesn't work. Okay. But this thing vends. And so I escalate. And so now I start knocking the thing. Right. And then that doesn't work. Right. And so then I start kicking the machine. Right. And that works. Let's say that works. Right. What did the machine teach me? An increase in my behavior. Like you said, that burst in my behavior is going to yield me what I want.
Right. So what's going to happen over time? What next time I come to get the Coke, where do I start?
Right.
You got it.
Right.
So when we're setting boundaries, beware the extinction burst. You need to understand that if you have reliably vended, okay, when people are used to getting what they want from you and you say no, they're not going to walk away. Okay. They're going to hit C4, then they're going to shake you, then they're going to kick you. This is the most important part. Do not bend as the extinction burst escalates. If you do, they will start there next time. Okay? So like we talked about this last time too, the self check-in, right? The boundary with the self. Can I hold this boundary? Am I ready for an extinction burst? If I am, you got to ride this thing till the wheels fall off. You cannot buckle in the middle of an extinction burst. You will it's better to not set the boundary at all.
Exactly.
Live to fight another day, okay? Than to set it, have an uptick in behavior, reinforce the increased intensity of behavior, problematic behavior, right? And then fold. You just give them a cookie for acting out. And you are assured more acting out in the future because we just taught them that it worked, okay? So that's really important. Beware the extinction burst. You should always expect a temporary increase in behaviors before people walk away. Girl, one time I actually called the number on the vending machine in Howard. Building underneath. I was so hungry, and that's the only thing and then I was like, C4, bam! I mean, I was shaking it, and then I literally was like, I'm calling 75 cents, right? But that's how much shaping behavior, that's how powerful behavior shaping is. It's not really about the 75 cents. It's like these behaviors yield an outcome. Why isn't this working for me? Right? You can see this in abusive relationships, but you can also see this in poorly boundaried relationships. I also want to say something I thought about after our last meeting. I want to make this clear. Not all narcissistic people are good people, right? Just like all non-narcissistic people are not good people. But all narcissistic people are sick people.
Can you say that one more time, Briana? Because I want everybody to hear that and let it resonate.
Not all narcissistic people are good people, right? As people who are not narcissistic, not all non-narcissistic people are good people. But all narcissistic people are sick people. And that's what you want to keep in mind, right? And expecting a sick person to be well is not rational.
Bree, can you also break down, I want to break down what you just said, because one of the things that we've talked about offline is that all or nothing thinking that sometimes we've been trained to have. You said something that I want you just to dive in just a little bit more. Can you break down the difference between an abusive relationship and a non-boundary relationship? Because they don't have to be one and the same.
Okay, so that's very good. I'll start with this. An abusive relationship is an unbounded relationship. Those are one and the same.
Right.
So if there's abuse, if there's a violation of willing and knowing violation of rights, physical integrity, safety, well-being, esteem, like if those things are very intentionally and very systematically encroached upon, that's abuse, right? In fact, if your partner or anyone in your life is forcing you physically or otherwise to do things you don't want to do, that's abuse. Okay. A very good example of a poorly boundaried relationship that is absolutely not abusive would be the relationship I have with my mother, or did have with my mother, right? Where like she did whatever I wanted her to do whenever I wanted her to do it, and I did whatever she wanted me to do whenever she wanted me to do it. And we love each other. And my mom's a good mom. I would listen. this will probably blow up. I was never spanked as a child. Like my mom was like really sweet. I'm like, no boundaries, right? And so she was always very nice to us. And so so that's a really nice example of a relationship that's not necessarily, not at all abusive, but poorly boundary. And so if you feel a lot of, so if somebody's not, and so if somebody's being mean to you, cruel to you, undermining your reality, invalidating you, belittling you, physically harming you, raping you, keeping you captive, accusing you, that's abusive. Who are you going with? Why are you wearing that? You shouldn't, control is abuse. And then poor boundaries. I mean, I've had poorly boundary relationships my entire life until I met Mirta.
Right.
And very few of them were abusive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Actually, it's really sweet. My husband and I have a very well-boundaried relationship. And that's part of what makes it so healthy and comfortable, is I really feel comfortable telling my husband, no, thank you, without a second glance. I mean, him too. He rarely does things he doesn't want to do. And sometimes he'll do things he doesn't want to do because of the kind of man he wants to be, not because I'm forcing him. And then that's still about him.
Right.
That's about that I checking in, like, right. So my husband will often do things he doesn't want to do, like take out the trash. Nobody wants to take out the trash, right? But he doesn't want me taking out the trash because of the kind of man he wants to be and sees himself as, right? So he doesn't want to be the kind of man who's watching his wife struggle to take the trash down and stuff. So he'll do things he doesn't want to do, but ultimately it's because he wants to do them.
Right.
Does that make sense? And so that's an okay place to do things you don't want to do, understanding the motivation it truly is about you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll do the same in my relationship with my husband. I might do something that is inconvenient for me, but I know it will make him really happy. Like my husband loves it when I bring him home in the before times when you used to go to like the gym and stuff, I would like wake up in the morning and go to the gym. And on my way home, I didn't even drink Starbucks. I would stop at Starbucks and bring him a Starbucks home. And he never asked. It wasn't always convenient, but it used to make him so happy. And so I'm like, oh, I want to be the kind of wife that makes her husband so happy. So I'm gonna stop at Starbucks, even though I only go to Starbucks to make him happy. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes sense.
Okay.
Break down. And hopefully I see the comments. People are making that connection between non-boundary and abuse. How abuse is non-boundaries, but non-boundaries does not necessarily equal abuse too. So yes.
And we can have poor boundaries in our relationships with our aunties, our uncles, our cousins, our moms, our brothers, our sisters, our good friends. Here's what you want to know. If you're in a relationship where somebody is kind to you, respects your rights, but you feel a lot of resentment a lot of the time, that's going to be an indication that it's a poorly boundaried relationship. Mm-hmm. Or that they'll do things for you, maybe that you asked for, maybe that you didn't. And then when you say no, they'll get really angry with you or try to feel very guilty. Okay, so those would be indications that the relationship is poorly boundaried. Abusive relationships will make you feel scared, will make you feel like you hate yourself, will make you, make you want to run, make you want to stay, make you want to, it's a cycle, it's up, it's down, it's all around, it's always kind of in a circle.
Honeymoon, yep.
I call it a merry-go-round, and it just doesn't stop. Sometimes it spins faster and sometimes it spins slower, but you will always pass 12 again, you will always pass 3 again, you will always pass, this thing doesn't stop, right? Mm-hmm. So let's get deeper to the nuts and bolts and like the last, how's my speed? Am I okay?
You're doing great.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. So just reminding ourselves that we always have the right to say no. And the reason is just because we don't want to. In fact, it's our duty to say no because we don't want to. Because if we do something when we don't want to do it, we end up feeling resentment. Mm-hmm. Okay? And resentment is a relationship killer. You want to feel a relationship.
I feel resentment in doing it though, right? And that severs the relationship, right?
You got it. So if I do things I don't want to do, I end up realizing that I enter into this implicit contract with the other. And I say, okay, I'll do this thing I don't want to do right now. And by the way, we don't discuss this. This is just implied. Okay. Right. I don't want to do this thing, but I want you to do something you don't want to do in the future. So I'm going to do this thing right now. And that's going to commit you to doing something you don't want to do in the future. Right. So I'll do it. Right. But none of this is discussed. Mm-hmm. I do what I don't want to do. Right. And then later down the road, I say, okay, hey, look, I need you to do something you don't want to do. And then that person says to me, oh, I'm not doing that. What do we do?
I'm thinking about something that you said too, about like, sometimes I do what I don't want to do because I want you to see me as a good person. So I'm trying to play to that empathy piece, right? That doesn't work anyway.
Correct. Exactly. You got it. That's why it doesn't.
Do this person.
Yes, you don't guilt them and you don't bend to guilt for them because all you're training them is a certain type of behavior. You're not appealing to the emotion. And they're not going to, you got it. Yes, you got it. That you nailed it. Exactly. You're not going to show them what a good person you are because there's no empathy there. All you're doing is training them to say, hey, do these series of behaviors, put the dollar in, hit C4, you'll get a Coke. Not like, you're not training them like, oh, I'm such a good person, and now you're going to do things you don't want to do because I'm doing things I don't want to do. We often do that with narcissistic partners as well. I'm going to do this thing I want to, you're going to see what a good person I am, and then you're going to do things you don't want to do. And the narcissistic partner goes, no, I'm not doing it.
I'm not.
And then you might guilt them, and then they're like, well, and this happens often. They'll say, well, you shouldn't have done it.
Right.
Woo. I'll never forget the day Mirta said that to me. I remember I came into a session, I was furious about something with a friend. And she listened to me and she said, well, that's your fault. And I said, Mirta, honey, did you hear the story I just told you? And she said, well, you shouldn't have done something you didn't want to do. And I said, what? She said, yeah, you have resentment because you did something you didn't want to do. And then you committed yourself to something. And then somebody didn't do whatever you wanted them to do after you did something you didn't want to do. And I was like, whoa. And then she said, every time you feel resentment, that's your fault. That's your responsibility. And so what I do now is use, just like I use guilt as an indicator, I use resentment as an indicator. And when I feel resentment in a relationship or I feel it bubbling, I ask myself, what am I struggling with? What did I do that I didn't want to do that set up expectations for me that are now not being met? And so poor boundaries always lead to resentment because we're doing things we don't want to do, and then we expect others to return the favor. Okay? So that's why another reason why boundaries are so critical in relationships.
And just going back to Kimmy's comment too, your no doesn't need an explanation. Like no is a complete sentence. Right?
Listen, we're going to get to that right now. Okay, listen. You never want to offer a reason for your no unless you want a solution. Okay. So for example, I used to live with my cousin. She didn't have a car. She would use my car often. Okay. If my cousin says, can I use your car? And I say no. And she says, why? And I say, because it doesn't have gas in it. Right. If that's really the problem, I should offer that. She'll say, oh, what's she going to say?
I'm going to go get you gas. I'll give you gas.
Now we've got two little critters that are willing. I'll meet the need. You'll meet the need. Here we go. Perfect. Right. This is good. Match made in heaven. Right. But if the answer is no, because you don't want anyone driving your car, or you just don't want her driving your car, because you can want one person to drive your car and not another. Right. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Right. So you might say to her, listen, no, you can't drive my car. And then she says, why? And then you say, it doesn't have gas in it. And she goes, well, I'll put gas in it, but you don't want her to take the car. So then now what are you going to say? Well,
it only takes a special kind of gas that you can only get.
I don't take a special kind of gas that you can get in Arizona. And then she'll say, well, I got time. I can go to Arizona. I'll hook you up. Like, then I'll save you a trip to Arizona. Right. And so that is also like, so when you offer a reason, you're going to get, people are just looking to get the need met. Are you my mommy? Are you my mommy? Are you? And so if you say, yes, I'll meet the need, we teach them to vend. But also, if I offer a reason, she's going to give me a solution.
I love it. So I love it. So we do not give an explanation unless we are open to a solution.
Correct.
No is reason enough. Yes.
No is the reason. And once you start to say, especially if you're really somebody who struggles with boundaries, people who lie about the no are people who struggle with boundaries. People start to offer you solutions. You're going to have a harder and harder time holding your no. And then you're going to train them to offer me solutions when I say no. When in fact,
that solution can also be a part of that extinguishment. Like
extinction burst, you got it. That's what I'm saying. Yes. But if I teach you to offer reasons, offer solutions for my no, the next time I say no just because, you're going to be bombarding me with solutions. You've got it. That's the extinction burst. Okay.
Right.
So anything we've taught people is effective. We should expect to get a lot more of it as we start to say no before it simmers. Here's the other thing. I promise you this. Mark my words. Okay. If you say no and you hold on to it, so-and-so will stop eventually. Okay. If you kick the shit out of that vending machine and it never vends, you walk away. Right? Even if you camp out there for 3 days, you'll eventually walk away. People only do what works. People stop doing what doesn't work. Render something ineffective. The extinction burst could get huge. The extinction burst could last for days. Okay. But inevitably this thing will stop because someone will move on, because underneath it all, we're still just looking to get a need met. I'm going to get thirsty camping out in front of this vending machine. Okay. Eventually I'm going to have to go. Okay. So if you set the limit, if you tolerate the extinction burst, eventually the behavior will extinguish completely. Okay. But you never want to buckle in the middle of the extinction burst. This is important. A little orientation goes a long way. When I started setting boundaries, I can feel myself getting faster because there's more I want to say. So I'll slow down. But when I started setting boundaries, I told everybody in my life I was going to be setting them. I said, hey, listen, I found I don't have boundaries. Many of the people in my life said, yeah, I know. I know. And so I told the people in my life I'd be setting boundaries. And so then when it came and they said, well, what does that mean? It means I'm going to be saying no more. My therapist said it's really good for me. Or I saw this really great presentation with these really two gorgeous, brilliant psychologists who told me that I needed to, right? And so I told everybody in my life I was going to be setting boundaries. And then I told them that mean I would be saying no more, and it would be good for our relationship and really good for me. And will you support me? And oh yeah, of course, girl. Yeah, that sounds great. I need to work on my boundaries too. Okay. Right. And then when they come, hit the button, see $4, and I go, hey, remember I told you I wasn't bending anymore? And remember I told you to be setting boundaries and you said you'd be helpful? Well, this is it. I'm going to say no. And then they go, this is your non-narcissistic friends. These are your non-abusive relationships, right? Like they go, oh, yeah, my bad. Oh, you're right. Yeah, no, totally. It's fine. Okay. Because even our friends who are used to getting bended, well, you got it. So here, this is really important. Okay. How to set the boundary, no explanation for your no, kind and firm, kind and firm, kind and firm, kind and firm, okay? The kindness is for you, the firmness is for them. Like the vending machine, all of us do better if we just know where the line is. So hold the line firm, because people around us you'll be more predictable, they'll respect you more, they'll like you more, and the relationships will be smoother, okay? The kindness is for you. The kindness is the sugar that helps the medicine go down. Because initially, when you say no, that guilt is going to rush up inside of you, okay? And so as you evaluate, did I do something wrong to somebody? Did I do something bad? No, I just said no. Okay, well, how did I say no? I said it really kindly. I was really kind and very firm. No, thank you. No, thank you. And listen, at the very beginning, that's all I could say, T. That's it. Hey, no, thank you. No, thank you. Well, what about like, no, thank you. How about this? No, thank you. Like, and that's all I could do. And people were like, well, this is ridiculous. And they would walk away because they can't get a Coke, even though I look a little weird, right? Like, no, thank you. That's all I could say. And that's all I said. No, thank you. 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 Well, that's stupid. Just answer the question. Why not? No, thank you. Right? And then walk away later. I'm like, oh my God, that was terrible. Did I do something wrong? It's like, no, I said no. I'm allowed to say no. I didn't hurt anybody. I said, no, thank you. I mean, that's kind. That's fine. And so you use that to soothe yourself to tolerate the no. So kind and firm, kind and firm, kind and firm. Okay. Don't offer a reason for your no. We did adaptive guilt versus non-adaptive guilt. So adaptive guilt is guilt that you feel that will help motivate you to repair because you've done something weird or terrible or whatever. Non-adaptive guilt is that a guilt that shows up when the boundary is getting pushed. That's not functional. So ignoring that, okay? Oh, this is a good one. The word selfish is garbage. That is such a manipulative term. Boy, talk about planting a guilt scene. We're supposed to be altruistic, especially as women and women of color. Oh my gosh. So let me tell you this. There's no diagnosis of selfish. If you look at it by the DSM, you cannot find it there, okay? There's narcissistic, which is no empathy, and not narcissistic. But it's not selfish to say no thank you. And in fact, it's a very generous, kind thing you're doing. You're going to make yourself uncomfortable to preserve this relationship.
Right.
You're welcome.
Even when you get the label of selfishness, right? You're being selfish because you're not doing something that I want you to do. So it's kind of on anyway, right? Like, if I'm being selfish because I'm not doing what you want me to do, like, I'm selfish, right?
Exactly. I love that point. In fact, I think I'll borrow it and add it to my presentation. But that's a really great point. It's selfish to pull you to do something you don't want to do for me. That's a whole. So there is no selfish. Inoculate yourself to the term selfish. It's garbage. It means nothing. And if you hate being called selfish, render it ineffective. You render being called selfish effective, you will get called selfish a lot more. Okay. I don't bend to selfish. Guess what? People don't call me selfish. Meanwhile, I'm doing exactly the things I want to be doing and not doing the things I don't want to be doing. Okay. We will have to do things we don't want to do, but it's ultimately because we're doing things we want to be doing. Like, I don't want to necessarily have to like go to the store, but like I want to eat. Right. So I want to do that. Right? So that's okay, right? When I think of, we talked about that already. Okay, I think of it this way. When I used to think about boundaries, I used to think about it being like me holding a wall between you and me. And now when I think about boundaries, I think that's the byproduct, but that's not the function. The real function is standing in solidarity with the self. I'm not going to abandon you, girl. Right? So-and-so wants you to do that thing. You don't want to do that thing. I'm going to stand with you and go, you don't have to do that thing. Instead of trying to like get yourself to offer yourself all the time. Right? It's like you want to stand in solidarity with the self, protect the self. No, you don't have to do that if you don't want to do that. Instead of going, you got to do that, girl. You got to do that. No, you're a bad person if you don't do that. It's like, no, we're going to stand in solidarity with the self. And so she doesn't have to do. She's busy right now. She doesn't have to. You got it. You got it. You got it. This is interesting. Do you think people with poor boundaries have greater or less compassion for others?
Oh, great. Probably great. Yeah.
People with good boundaries have great compassion. We often think of boundaries as selfish, not compassionate, not empathic. It's none of the above. People with poor boundaries are filled with resentment. Typically filled with resentment. And people who are resentful are often much less compassionate.
And I think about it too, like, so when I talk about like trauma trainings, like trauma to me is the #1 boundary violator, right? It just violates.
Oh, 100%.
And so boundaries to me look like protection. So when you talk about standing in solidarity with the self, I'm protecting myself. I'm being with myself, right? And that is the greatest gift that we can give to ourselves. And protected self is the greatest gift that we can give to someone else.
Oh, yes!
Right?
Yes, I love that. You got it. You got it. You got it. You got it. And
I told them they won't get this Black girl therapy magic today.
I love that. I love that. I love that. You got it. You got it. You got it. So when we think about, if I don't give people what they want, even though I don't want to give it, I'm not compassionate. That's not true. If I do all these things I don't want to do, I'm going to be really, really, really resentful. And then when something bad happens to you, I'm going to be like, yeah, she had it coming.
Right.
Right. Okay. This is important too. I always say this, you never know who you're messing with until you set a boundary, right? You'll never know if people are just, this is the key. This is the key. If you want to find out if somebody's abusive or just poorly boundaried, set a boundary.
Right.
Right? If somebody's just poorly boundaried and you set the boundary, you'll get a little extinction burst and then it will go away and you'll reshape their behavior quite naturally, really easily, really quickly, right? If somebody's abusive and you set a boundary and they knowingly violate your boundary, we're talking about something very different now. Okay, so you'll never know who you're messing with until you set a boundary, because you'll never be able to interpret why people transgress the boundary until you set one, because they may be transgressing the boundary because you didn't tell them it was there, right? And so you'll never be able to interpret why they're violating it. Once you set the boundary with them, it becomes clear that them violating it is not about them not knowing. Right. They know full well the boundary's there and they ran it over anyway. And so that starts to illuminate a very different picture, doesn't it? You got it. Okay. So I would say this, as you start to practice setting boundaries, this is also very important. I would go out to in. Okay. I would start with much more casual relationships. I started with telemarketers. And then I would go to those little condo shows, and I'd be like, I'm not buying it. No, thank you. No, thank you. And I would just practice saying no, thank you. Right. And I got really, 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 really good at it. But you want to start with people who are less close to you and get really good at it. And it will be so reinforcing that will fortify you to bring the boundaries to the closer ring. Okay. Then you set boundaries there. That will feel so good and reinforcing. You open up all this mess around you and that will fortify you to bring it to the inner ring. Right. But I would not set a huge boundary with the closest person to you off the bat. Okay. I would start with less risk relationships and move in. Okay. You will lose people in this journey. Okay. Relationships that rely on you having no boundaries to be maintained, those relationships will dissolve. But here's the thing. Do you want a relationship that requires you to have no boundaries to be in it? Right. You got it. Okay. Also, let's see. People will set up the boundary wherever you set the line. People will camp out wherever you set the line. Okay, so I always set the line out further and then move the line in. People move in really happily. Think about a professor that you really, really respected, right? And then one day they're like, you want to get coffee? And you're like, ah! And they move the line in a little and you go crazy, right? When I have students after class, they might reach out to me and they say, Dr. Boyd, I say, call me Briana. They go, oh. So I took the line from here to here and they went nuts, right? They loved it. So always start, when you meet new people, that's also a good place to start with boundaries. The people out there and new people, okay? When you meet people, start with a boundary that's further out and then you can always move it in. But if you start with boundaries here, people like it here. It's nice and warm, okay? And so as you start to push them out, they go kicking and screaming.
Right.
Okay? But if you keep pushing and you hold that line, they will go. If you push them out and they start kicking and screaming, you go, okay, never mind, come on back, right? You taught them to kick and scream. It's going to be much harder to get them off your face later down the line, okay? We need to respect other people's boundaries. People who are poorly boundaried are also typically have a hard time accepting other people's boundaries because nobody's accepting theirs. Right. They're getting forced to do things they don't want to do, and so they may force others to do they don't want to do. So respect your children's boundaries. Respect your partner's boundaries. We really should not be doing anything you don't want to be doing. Really, really, really. And when we are, we should expect that we should have trouble in our relationships. And when we are not, we should expect to feel pretty good and have our relationships to become pretty streamlined. And have compassion for the people who, not the abusers, but the people in your life who you set poor boundaries with. They're going to have a hard time initially. You know, have a little compassion for them because they didn't sign up for this. So like one day they woke up on this ride, okay? And so that's why the orientation is also very kind. Okay?
Transparency. I'm going to do this, and I value the relationship. And I want you to be with me during this process, right? I want you to take it. So I'm starting here. I see if you can handle it. And if not, we're going to find out, right?
Right. You got it.
We're still going to be there, right? And so
you got it. Let's see. Yeah. So I think that's kind of basically all you need to know about that.
Okay. So if you can summarize this in 3 takeaway points, Dr. Bree, where would it be when we think about setting and maintaining boundaries? What do you walk away with?
We walk away with, you always have the right to say no, no explanation needed, just because you don't want to. You're the only person that's the most responsible in the world for maintaining that and taking care of that. You have a responsibility to yourself. You are the most responsible human being for doing that, right? Mm-hmm. Number 2 is inoculate yourself to guilt. Okay, guilt is a pro-social emotion, no more, no less. Inoculate yourself to guilt. The last one that I would say is, you'll never know who you're messing with until you set a boundary. That's really important. When I meet new people, I find a way to say no really early on in the relationship just to see who I'm messing with. If I say no to something early on and they go, oh, that's fine. I'm like, oh, we gonna be friends, right? And if I say no early on and they push back, this is especially important in dating, right? If you're someone who's dating, I would set boundaries immediately. Like, nope, not tonight. I can't. I'm busy. Whatever. Don't even you don't have to give a reason. And then if they push those boundaries, okay, boy, bye. I'm moving on, right? And so that's what's really important too. So I would inoculate yourself to guilt. I would always set boundaries early so you know who you're messing with. And whatever the first thing was that
you can say no without a reason, without an explanation.
And you're required. It's your responsibility to say no. And practice makes perfect. This will be an absolute mess at first, okay?
Right.
First, you'll set it. If you underdo it, don't worry. Oh, this is really important. Last thing. If you overdo a boundary, just go, whoa. Don't undermine your no. So once you set the boundary kind and firm, in the beginning, sometimes you might be too firm and not kind enough. Okay? Right. Don't undermine your no. Just take that running into the next time. And a little softer. Okay. If you are too soft, set your no firmer. Okay. And then I don't know if firmer is a word. Set your no firmer. But this is gonna change and grow, and you're gonna practice and get better at it as you go. Okay. So it's gonna be a mess at first. If you're too firm, don't undermine your no. Wait till the next pass to try it again. If your no wasn't hard enough, just try it again, right? And we'll find that sweet spot. I can say no to anybody about anything, anytime, and it's like I'm a totally different person than I used to be.
Okay. Last question, and this brings back Tima and Christina's question. Should we confront individuals as we're learning to set our boundaries, or should we just stop doing what they ask?
Yeah.
It depends on where they are. Does it depend on where they are within our circle of?
That's a good yes. So that's the answer, right? So first and foremost, I would give everybody in your life an orientation. That's really important. It got me a long way. Orientation goes a long way. People can get with the program a lot more easily when they know what the program is. Okay. So that's number 1 is I would give everybody in your life an orientation right now. Right. And then I would practice with those who are further out, and then I would bring it in as I feel more and more fortified. My mom and my family members were the last people I set boundaries with.
So, and then Sharice's comment, you've answered this, but when they push back, can refer to a very nice pushback too, right? Distinguishes can be like, I'll take part of Arizona. That can be a very nice pushback, but it's still a pushback.
100%. Yes, absolutely. Because if they push back and you buckle, you just got more pushback.
Right.
So, you might even say to them, I know this is different for you. I know this is different, but the answer is still no. And this is with the people like the close people to me. I love you. The answer is no. My nephew's on like a broken record. Absolutely not. I love you. Absolutely not. I love you. Absolutely not. I love you. But they're trained to have boundaries with me at this time. But yeah, and you can say, listen, I know this is different. I told you I'd be saying no more. Remember, like I'm saying no more, and I love you, but I'm saying no. Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's what I say. I love you. No, thank you.
I have to set a boundary all the time because we have and I want to thank Dr. Bree. So Dr. Christina said we are great together. So Dr. T and Dr. Bree. So I want to thank you, Dr. Bree, for coming on, for sharing your insight, your wisdom, and your expertise. We will definitely have you back. For those of you who are watching, today is also a special day. One of the reasons why we chose today for Dr. Thursdays is because our 1-year anniversary. So happy 1-year anniversary to Dr. Tara Tuesdays today. Yearly, we literally launched Dr. Tara Tuesdays, and we have grown into such a wonderful, caring, safe, and supportive community where people are able to bring in, Dr. B, there's no one I would have rather celebrated this anniversary with you. So thank you for bringing your expertise. Thank you for bringing your guidance and answering the question. One of the things too, one last question I do want to ask though, is do people with narcissism have boundaries with themselves?
They can have, they don't have a ton of empathy.
Okay.
So it depends. I mean, not all people with narcissism are the same.
Right.
But the people that I know with narcissism they're pretty naturally well boundaried, because empathy is one of our bigger vulnerabilities to having poor boundaries. We feel the pain of each other. We want to stop it. People with narcissism, they don't struggle with that as much. And so that's when that will really like turn you out, when you're like, you've done all these things you don't want to do, and they're like, no, I'm not doing it, no, just because, and you're like, you have to get resentful, really crazy, right? No, you owed me because I didn't. Nobody owes you anything for doing something you didn't want to do. Nobody will ever owe you anything for doing something you didn't want to do, except for work. They owe you money because you work. But no, yeah. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a great answer to the question. So thank you, Dr. Briana. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Please join us. So next Tuesday, we will continue part 2. For this Tuesday, this is a doubleheader Dr. Tara week, but earlier this week we had Healing from the Trauma of Racism Part 1 with Dr. Natalie Evan, a brilliant clinical psychologist who was my supervisor, trained me in trauma-informed care. Next week, we're going to have Shauna Murray Brown, who is a brilliant licensed clinical social worker who does healing work, mind-body work, and trauma work from a racial or equity standpoint. So you do not want to miss it. So join me on Tuesday, June the 16th for part 2. Dr. Briana, thank you so much again, joining us all the way from California, making time in your schedule to be a part of the Dr. Tara community. We have welcomed you and we want you to be part of it regularly. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you want to be a part of our newsletter, which is yet to go out, but we're working on it, please put your email address in the comments or send me a private message. As always, let's do it together. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Peace.
Bye.